Good morning. I'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. On the panel today, to my far left is Mr. Robert Buss. To my immediate left is Ms. Lynn Nesbitt. My name is Stu McPherson. I'll be chairing the hearing. Representing the City of Winnipeg Assessment Taxation Department is Ms. Svetlana Schlegel, and the secretary for today's hearing is Ms. Ellen Rowe. We'll be hearing applications for the revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application and will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council. It's independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they so wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave and the process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. This is information. All public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Let me swear the parties in, please. If you do have a cell phone, please put that on silent.
Please state your full name. Svetlana Schlegel. And you said to represent the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Please state your full name.
Rocky Nico.
You have firm to represent the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Neufeld. You're representing the owners of 4 properties today. 3 of them is the amount of assessed value only, and 1624 Ness has 3 points of contention. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So we'll just deal with these properties as they're listed on the docket today. So the first property we'll hear is 305 Broadway. So Mrs. Sasser, when you're ready, we'll hear from you, please.
File number 19-4649. Roll number is 13093267000. Address is 305 Broadway. Owner is 305 Broadway, Winnipeg. We are valuing the property as it stands of January 1st, 2020, based on the economic condition as April 1st, 2018. This appeal is respect to the amount of the assessed value only. Based on the evidence in this report, it is assessor opinion that the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018 is $5,928,000. In that, the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed. The subject property is located
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there not a recommendation on this property?
Okay, so, sorry, yes, you're right. The 2020 assessed value should be reduced to $5,483,000. The subject property is located at northeast corner of the intersection Broadway and Donald Street. Please open page 8 of the report, the photo subject property. The subject size has an rectangular shape of 5,677 square feet. The improvements was built in 1972, 10-floor building with usable area of 14,301 square feet. And page 3, here presented rent comparables. It's 50 rent comparables close to subject property and highlights its subject property leases. So media of these 50 comparables came across $12. On page 4, presented subject property market and home, potential rent for 40,301 square feet. We did apply price reduction. Please open page 17, price reduction happened to support. So for 38,798 square feet was applied $12 per square foot. 1,630 per square feet, $20 per square foot. So, and also storage was added, $14,861. So our potential gross income came across 513,000. We did allow 10.5% vacancy. We also allowed for not recoverable expenses. Not recoverable expenses include general 2% expenses allowance. Those expenses would include advertising, promotion, professional fees, structure repairs, etc. And shortfall allowance per square foot to account for not recoverable expenses during time of vacancy, $8.50. Our capitalization rate, we did apply 7.55%. That is supported by, on page 6, we have a table, capitalization rate table for downtown offices. As for our range for the city downtown offices from 6.75 to 6.75, but if you can see on Collier 7.25% maximum. We applied 7.55%, it's much higher that we provided in page 6, but it's reasonable for this type of property. So our income value came across 5,483,000. On page 9, income expenses Mellon presented. And I want to bring to attention on page 14, our recovery revenue line 4210-20 shows the management fee recovery. So we did apply 2% expense allowance, it's reasonable. Based on the evidence in this report, this assessor opinion the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2019, $5,483,000. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Newfeld, questions for the assessor?
Yes. Did you prepare this report?
I review it and check.
Pardon me?
It was prepared by Jeremy,
Okay.
submitted,
Right.
but I'm looking at it's correct.
Okay, so it's prepared by somebody else now. I have 2 copies here, and I just want to make sure that, I guess this was resubmitted December 24th. Are they, does the board have both? And the assessor have both? I'm just wondering if there are any differences. Which copy are you reading from?
From October 3, 2019, because
Yeah,
it
they're
was
both say October 3.
Yeah,
but-
no changes was
But
made.
they're stamped at the top. One's stamped September 19th, the other's stamped December 24th.
I think one of them has a recommendation, one doesn't.
No, they both did.
Oh, okay. No, I only gave the board the one that's dated December 24th.
The one that was,
December 24th.
okay, so this one here, okay. So then, page 4, this was this all generated by the model?
Yes, it's correct.
Okay.
Then by on page 17.
And then the change
a
on-
new
What were the
evaluation
changes?
summary was changed, added.
You
On
added-
page 17,
Right, you added storage income,
correct.
but you reduced office income. Okay, and those are pretty much the only changes?
Correct.
And what was the reason for that?
Because this property reported $12 per square foot. And also, if you look on my comparables on page 3, it's in $12, it's inside range between $9.50 and $13.
So it was just a bit of an acknowledgement that the actual rents were lower than the model, is that?
Yes, and plus all these 50 comparables, it's specific rent for this type of building, it's dictate reduction.
Well, on
Residents.
the statements, you were going through something, but I just wanted to ask you a question. Page 14. Line 429900, which is on page 14, but the 10th line down. Total recovery revenue, $501,959, correct?
I talk about management fee recovery.
No,
For
but this is what,
$41,000.
I'm asking what, this is what the statement says, correct?
Yes, it's correct.
They're recovering 500. And then on page 16, the total expenses were $736,000, of which $206,000 were interest. So, by my calculations, the expenses were $530,000, and they only recovered $501,000. That correct? Okay, thank you. And did you get a chance to inspect the building?
No,
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
no, I've been in building. One second. I've been in building. Yes, I inspected this building in 2017 for my job because I was moving businesses around.
Okay.
Oh, I submit my briefs there too for municipal board.
That's right. I remember you brought it
Several
up.
times.
Mr. Buss, question for the assessor?
On page 17, the amount that you're adding for, oh, I see. you're adding $14,861 for storage.
Yes,
Is that like $1 a square foot or something, or do you know how many square feet of storage there is?
it's just reported, I guess, 1 second. Storage area, yeah, it's just reported, so we try to follow.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nesbitt.
Yes, I have a question about your cap rate. In your summary, you said a high cap rate was reasonable for this type of property. Can you explain what that means?
This cap rate a little bit higher than in our, on page 6.
Yes.
We could have a cap rate range between 6% and 6.75 for downtown offices.
Right.
But for this particular properties, we did apply 7.55%. It's depend of location, age, building.
So it's just based on location and age?
Yes.
Nothing about the quality of the building?
Yes.
I'm just asking because the cap rate is higher than all the other cap rates, including the industry reported cap rates.
Yes, it's because it's our mass appraisal model generated. It's considered more just location, age, quality of building, considered management expenses for this building. If it's higher, so its building quality much lower.
So what is the quality of this building?
In our range, it's average, but specific for this building, this model, it's real a lot of involved, so I trust these models.
Okay, thank you.
To just follow up on that, I see that you have on your chart OFAs, OFPs, OFSs. This particular property is classed as an OFC,
Correct.
and is there a reason that the range for an OFC is not shown on the chart?
OFC usually create specific model-generated expenses, roughly speaking, because OFC it's a building average to below building quality, sometimes below average material and finishes, predominantly located in downtown area, 3-story and more. It's OFC. That's why all my comparables similar to subject property.
But for the cap rate, would you make the assumption that the cap rate should be higher for a C than for a B, or?
Yeah,
Certainly
because it shows that it's below average material and finishes. It's a specific type of buildings, that's why it's picking this type of these numbers for our cap rate.
Thank you.
Mr. Neufeld, we'll hear from you when you're ready, please.
Well, I didn't submit twice, or did I?
You did.
I did. Okay. Which one are we using? The one? Okay, that's the one I'm looking at. Okay. Property is corner Broadway and Donald. I guess I should know that, shouldn't I? My office is on the 6th floor of this building, and it's such a lovely view I have. I look out my window every day and see the CRA there and wondering when they're going to come to get me. But it is a C building according to the Johnson report, so we are in agreement with the city on the classification of it. And the reason it's C is because it's a small floor plate and lack of amenities, a small overall building. The major issues with the building, which we briefly discussed, now, it says major HVAC issues. Now, that's the people in my office who write that because they're always complaining that the heating controls and the cooling controls don't work. They're not very knowledgeable about office buildings because this is everywhere. It's like this, you know. What happens is a typical building, they have what's called a VAV box, and it's supposed to control a zone. There's supposed to be 6 on our floor, and 5 of them are dummies, just so people can play with the switch and think that they're adjusting. That's typical all over. But it is an older thermal design, and the real issue with the thermal part is that there's no separation on the windows. So it was built at a time when, 72, when before Windows makers started installing the thermal separation. What that is a non-heat conductive piece of material between the outer frame pane and the inner pane. So what we have is on a cold day like today, the windows, all that heat transference comes through. And you can see it in our parging as well, that it is. Now this just speaks to condition. I mean, it's a building, it is what it is, and it's just speaks to condition. We also, this last year, had a major failure flood in the basement where a flood occurred and completely killed our electrical service. And it happened, I wasn't in town at the time, but it's just an indication of the quality that we're dealing with. Like most modern buildings will have backup generators and systems that deal with this sort of thing and protection. We don't have it. So we had a standby generator outside for 6 months while the insurance looked after it. So again, speaking to quality and condition. The valuation issues, what we did on this is we had the same statement, and we noted in the statement that there were some vacant space, that the potential income on the statement was $446,000, but we grossed it back up as full to $518,000, and there's no separate rent for the storage in the basement at all. But you can see that our number is very close to the assessor's number, so I think it's just a semantic issue we're not going to bother with. Everything else we're pretty much in agreement with the assessor's recommendations with the exception of the management expense. And earlier I asked the assessor a question, so I just want to point that out again, that the statements actually show that there's a recovery of $501,000, expenses of $530,000. So there is a $29,000 shortfall in non-recoverables. So we've taken that into our workup and we've applied 5%, stabilizing it, because some of those non-recoverables could be due to vacancy and other problems that they were experiencing. All the repair work, by the way, was covered by insurance, so it's not for that. But it's just stabilizing at 5%. So this property did make our study on the last pages on our management expense study for non-recoverables, and I was just wondering if I could point it out to you on here. Could probably pick it up. No. Oh. Yeah. It's actually on page 48, and it's mislabeled. It says January 19, it was actually January 2018. 531,000 with non-recoverable of 33,000. So this is for the statement following this one, but was within the reference period, 6.29%. And this is typical for all buildings of this nature. The other issue has to do with the cap rate, and I'm just wondering where the 9.13 came from. Well, I'll start and see where it leads me. The basic premise of a property like this, we would start with our Collier's cap rate study, page 25-26, which is doesn't include, or has closing costs included, which actually artificially bring those rates down. It's a sales issue, not a appraisal tool. So on page 30, we have the downtown office, and you'll note we track A and B. We don't track C. There's a chance a building like this could have slipped into C. So the range is 6.75 to 8%. And from there, we look at the individual problems on the building. So turning back to the first page, we started with a base rate of 7.5. The issues with this property, I alluded to already, were the quality issues. It's a dated building and has problems. But the big issue, and it was known at the time in April 2018, that the major tenant is leaving. Colliers is the major tenant. We put an RFP in the market. It's not a secret. We'll be moving somewhere else. So we now have 3 floors in the building. So that's a big chunk. 30% of the space is going vacant. Now, in addition, with 310 Broadway, which is kitty corner, where we have 5 floors vacant, very, very similar building, we're going to have a ton of Class C vacancy at that corner. And what this is it's a result of the, I guess we'll call it the trickle-down effect or the trickle-up effect, more apt. When Winnipeg is not absorbing office space, there are no new users. There is no new industry. So what happens is when a new building is built, for example, Hydro and then True North, what it does is it just causes vacancies down the line. So a good example of this is True North picked up their first big tenant, which was TDS Law, pulled it out of 201 Portage. 201 Portage backfilled that with I believe it was with another tenant that came out of one of the B buildings on St. Mary's. And St. Mary's then becomes competitive and goes after the C buildings. What they're doing is offering better amenities for the same price. That's the nature of a market like ours to handle absorption. And we have actually several market research papers that were released to show what was happening with absorption and what the predictions are in absorption. So what it happens is that eventually it reaches a point where the inferior buildings end up having higher than typical vacancy issues. And inferior would relate to, in this day and age, is it used to be, maybe just looking at old buildings, maybe didn't have as many elevators, things like that. In today's day and age, it has to do with code upgrades, the cost of code upgrades. And we had one tenant move a partition wall in our space on the 7th floor because we wanted to move them around so that Colliers could take some of the space on the 7th floor. And to do that, there was a new occupancy permit required, a code review, and a $40,000 bill for code changes. And there was fresh air and predominantly fresh air and barrier-free access. So this is what's happening to the lower class buildings, is that they're not getting the income to afford these code changes. And this happened in 2014-15 when that occurred. So that you won't see that in our statements today. And as a result, we're looking for a higher cap rate than typical because this is something that's known, and the prospect of facing a 30% vacancy, the market application is only 10%, would make an investor be concerned about taking this on. And so he's going to drive the price down. And that's just the nature of the building. Now, a couple of examples of buildings. There are a few that have transacted, and on page 40, one of the top was 200 Portage. the objections from the city, but this is a managed property by one of my clients, and purchaser is one of my clients, vendor was one of my clients. There was a leaseback arrangement in it, sold April 27th, 2017, and on that date, 2 new leases were signed for 100% of the space by Scotiabank. So yes, a leaseback, 8.56%, Superior Building. 905 Waverly is a suburban building, it's the old Stantec. This was another client of mine who purchased the building with an arrangement with 24/7 as the tenant. And that cap was more aggressive because it's a suburban location in southwest Winnipeg, which is more desirable. Further down the page is 423 Main. This is, wouldn't call this Class B, this is more like C, D, but this was the Canada Wheat Board was in there, and it went to market. Very, very difficult process. Our agents who handle the sale say that working for the feds is the most demanding listing job you can get, because they are thorough and they don't want to leave money on the table, and they have specific rules that have to be followed. So we're comfortable using it. I'm comfortable using it as an appraiser. And the cap on that one was 10.06%, and that cap was calculated based on what the new tenant, 80% of the space was leased up, the lease amount was known, as well as the cost of the TIs in the building. So we had the sale price, the TIs, and the projected rent. That's how that one was created. Historically, if you look at the old Canada Wheat Board rent in the sale, the cap would have actually been 12.18%, but that's not a basis upon which it was purchased. 180 King below is a little bit different because it's a strata title on another. They don't control the second floor or the parkade. They just control floors 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so that would have been the impact on that sale. That's why I capped it 10.03%. Again, higher than we're looking for. And I just figured out the 9.13. Page 41. The subject sold, and in April 2016, 9.13% was the sale. Now, I imagine that the city hasn't reported it because I think it was a multi-role sale, including the parking lot at 118 Smith, because they sold together, and we handled, of course, the sale, so we had an accurate breakdown. So, yes, I'm looking for a number below the sale, but that's because when this site sold last time, it sold full, and it sold with a lot of life left on the leases, which, as of the reference date, were then known to be expiring, and that would be the difference in value. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Mrs. Susser, questions for the applicant?
It was mentioned the problem with cooling heating system in the building. Do you are aware that cooling and heating system was replaced in June 2018 from existing natural gas generated damaged by flooding that happened in 2016?
I'm sorry.
Do you are aware that cooling and heating system was fully replaced in July 2018?
No, it wasn't fully replaced. There were some changes and alterations in the system. The delivery system is the same. The chiller tower had some work done on it, and the delivery is still the same. I invite you down to visit me in my office on a hot day, and you're going to say, what is that 11 by 17 paper doing hanging in the window and the blinds? That's to change the airflow so that it doesn't blow in the windows and it actually goes into the room. So I've got the most modified room in the place, paper modification for HVAC.
Okay. You use capitalization rate 9.13%, correct?
Yes.
Please look at page 26, page and briefs. Downtown offices low from 6.25% to 7.25%. It's not inside this range. It's not supported by your evidence, correct?
Earlier, when I was presenting this information, what I said was that this is an advertising feature, not a capitalization rate study. And I have access to the actual information. The major difference is that the brokers add in cost to close, which will be land title transfer fees and leasing commissions. And in doing so, they raise the sale price but don't change the income, which has the effect of showing a lower cap rate. So because we have all this data, I'm able to adjust that, and then that adjustment is shown on page 30. The second issue with that is we don't typically track these buildings, and on page 28 are the descriptions of the office, and you'll see that the B office, size 50,000 to 500,000. Building finishes are good with average systems in place, usually the largest office asset class in most major centers. It's not 305 Broadway.
No.
There are also buildings that attract what we call a national covenant, and what that means is that somebody with a better credit risk, and investors want to see those as their tenants because the risk of default is lower. And we only have one tenant in the whole building who has that, and that's Starbucks. The rest are local covenants.
Nothing further? Thank you. Mr. Buss?
In the sale on page 41, 8.04% parameters. Is that what you were just explaining? Is that when you don't add in the extras, it would actually be 8.04?
What it was is we had the appeal brief from that year, and which was right here. So we just took the appeal brief and opened it to the model generated rent that was applied, and just as a point of comparison between actual and the model.
So just the NOI was used?
Yeah, it was right from here.
Right.
Yeah, and it was just, and we want to just show the differences, and the reason why, of course, is that when the sale occurred, lease-up had finally occurred, and there was Lawton had taken more space, taking over another tenant, and the mailer that would have gone to the city in the previous year had a higher vacancy. It was
okay, then I think that's...
Yeah, I mean, the point was, what we were using was the NOI as of the date of sale versus the NOI generated by a mailer that the city, that was a year and a half out of date.
Okay, and you had also said about this sale that you didn't like the 4.8 million, you're asking less, because we shouldn't use this sale because...
Well, the performance has deteriorated since that time, and that's due to the market.
Since 2016.
Yes, because of new product on the market with no absorption, no new users, and so it's just a game of musical chairs with tenancies of people moving around. Right now, it's even worse right now because now True North is fully on stream, so that we put a couple 100,000 square feet into a market that didn't need it, and you're going to see the effects elsewhere. And then there's also, that goes in with, the other major thing that happened is the provincial government. With the change in the last provincial government, several leases have been terminated. I work...
Were those terminated before April 1st, 2018?
When was the election? We knew about it, yes. Yes, we knew about it because I took on the WHA portfolio in 2016.
Did the
And-
True North come on board before?
No,
April
they were
1st?
working on it at the time. And the thing is, the deals were being made. Like, you don't wait till the building's built and then let's try to lease it out now. Like, everybody knew about the TES lease for the 3 floors, going back to almost when construction started. In the business, we know what's, the definition of market value, knowledgeable seller, knowledgeable buyer. So we were knowledgeable, we knew what was happening. Provincial government downsizing on the WHA end, firsthand I'm participating in, so we know what they were doing. And there's more than that in provincial government. We have a number of provincial government leased
Okay.
properties. They are downsizing.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt?
I have no questions.
I don't think I do. Just clarification on your chart, your optimal, and then your adjustments. And they're all subjective, correct? And surprisingly, the 9.15 comes up to the 9.13.
Well, I don't hesitate to use the word subjective. I would say that they're a trained opinion of value.
Right.
But yes, there's always room for debate, and the more detail I give you, the more it's open to debate. But that's the concept. What we're trying to get into is let's talk about all of these factors. There's at least 23 factors. It's not age.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
if you look at location, 10 out of the 100, so that's 10%, and you're reducing that by 2 points, which is fairly significant. And what's wrong with the location of Broadway and Donald for a Class C office building?
But because Broadway's emptying out right now. And I mentioned 310. Wamanee's down the street has got floors available now. 280 would have major problems if it weren't for the long-term federal provincial leases. 287's having a hard time filling after its renovation. So Broadway is, at our juncture, is becoming less significant. The draw now is, even though it's like 2 blocks away, as silly as that seems, but the draw is going north. Well, you say if that were a house, you'd say, well, 2 blocks, what's the big deal? But remember, the downtown area is split up into about 6 recognizable sectors, right? And Law Courts, Government, Portage and Main, South Portage, the York, St. Mary's corridor, Broadway corridor.
Actually, St. Mary corridor, right?
Yeah.
Not St. Mary's,
That's correct.
St. Vital, right? All right, thank you. Desire for summation? No, thank you. Now, the next property we're going to deal with is 1624 Ness, and this one has other issues as well as the valuation. So we'll deal with the value first, the assessor, and we'll deal with the other 2 points of contention afterwards, where Mr. Neufeld will address those.
Yeah.
Did you need a moment?
30 seconds. Yeah.
Do you want us to recess?
Sorry?
Do you want us to recess? Or he reviews? Do you want us to review?
Can we just confirm the whole thing? Okay, yeah, I think we're going to confirm the whole thing because there's a liability issue that when we deal with that,
You deal with that.
we'll do it at the same time.
Okay. So therefore, Ms. Assessor, if you would just give us a brief synopsis of what the valuation is, and just tell us what the classification and the liability is, the taxation. So
File number 19-4362. Row number is 07569066300. Address is 1624 Ness Avenue, owner is 57655 Manitoba Limited. We are valuing the property as it stands of January 1st, 2020, based on economic condition April 1st, 2018. This appeal, with respect to the amount of assessed value and liability classification of property is confirmed. Based on the evidence in this report, it is assessor opinion that the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018 is $5,433,000. In that, the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, no questions then?
Yeah, just clarification. So the same as before, Mr. Poole did this report and you're here presenting it?
Correct.
Thank
And
you.
I review it, it's
Yeah,
correct.
that's fine.
Mr. Buss?
No questions.
Ms. Nesbitt? I just have one minor one. The valuation is $5,433,000, but if I look at your valuation on 5 and 6, it's $5,705,000. So it's actually the $5,433,000 that's in the roll, is that correct?
Yes. It was provide notice of assessment. Right now it's much higher, but we ask to confirm the assessed value of $5,452,000 because we constantly, it's live document, we constantly update records.
Okay. And you did state that it's class code 60?
60, correct.
And it's taxable.
Taxable.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. No further presentation then? Thank you. Any questions or concerns from the panel? Are we okay to continue? Does anyone need a break at this point? Okay, then we will deal with the next property, 428 Portage. When you're ready, Ms. Assessor, go ahead, please.
File number 19-4.
Sorry, before we start, were there multiple submissions on this as well? I just want to make sure I have the right one. Because I've only got one from September 19th.
That's what I
That's
have.
the only one that we have.
Oh, okay. Sorry to interrupt.
We have two for you both.
Two for me, okay.
December 27th.
That's the one that we're using now.
First, go ahead, please, Assessor.
File number 19-4559. Row number is 12093681000. Address is 428 Portage Avenue. Owner is Neptune Management Limited. We are valuing the property as it stands of January 1st, 2020, based on the economic condition April 1st, 2018. This appeal with respect to the amount of the assessed value only, based on the evidence in this report. In this assessor opinion that the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018 is $5,356,000, and that the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed. The subject property is located at southeast corner of the Portage and Bach Street. This open page 10 through 13. West we see subject property photos, air photos in street view. The subject size has rectangular shape of 11,278,000. The improvements was built in 1928, through addition 19 or some effective years built we have 1945. It's improvement 6-floor building with leasable area in our record 52,262 square feet. On page 3 on my briefs, 3 and 4, I presented 15 comparables for subject properties with highlights of subject property leases. Leases $11 and media around $12. On page 5 started subject property market income for our leasable area 52,262 square feet. We apply average $10.30. Our potential rent $530,000. We did apply vacancy law specific for this property high, it's 10.5%. We allowed for non-recoverable expenses 2% that include advertising, promotion, professional fee, structure repairs, etc. And also shortfall allowance per square foot to account for not recoverable expenses during time of vacancy of $8.50. Our capitalization rate for this subject property is 7.8%. I would like to mention that our capitalization rates for most properties range from 6.3 to 8% for 2020 assessment years. On page 14, income expenses measure. And through page 27. And owner reported 45,049 square foot of leasable area for these properties. We have a management fee recovered, reported by owner too, that via our 2% expenses allowance is fair. So based on the evidence of this report, this assessor opinion that the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018, $5,356,000. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Mr. Newfeld, questions?
Yes. Same as before, Mr. Pohl prepared this report. And
Correct. And I review it and
on
I don't
page.
do any extra
Okay.
recommendation.
You didn't make any changes.
Yes, I would do same, yeah.
Okay.
I agree with this report.
On page 1, leasable area is 52,262 square feet. On page 24, somebody's highlighted my copy, but the owner is reporting 45,049 square feet.
Correct, that's why I see the discrepancy here, that's why I mentioned it.
Yeah, so, but you're using, where did you get
Yes, it's our record,
Where did you get the 52,000 from?
it's in our record, in our system.
Okay. But I can tell you that for the last,
Because gross floor area of this building is 71,000 and 11,000 is basement. So we have 60,000 square feet leasable area, but we need to adjust for stairwell.
but the city is not the property manager. You didn't measure it?
No.
Okay. And I can tell you that for the last 15 years, we've been trying to inform the city each time that this is the leasable area, and it always keeps coming back. but this has been consistently provided for, I think, since 2010. That was the last BOMA remeasure. Anyway, okay, sorry, question time. Then on page 6 and 7, the value of this was all then generated by the model.
Correct.
Now, in this case, although you're not allowed for non-recoverables, it's fair to say that the building is basically a mix of gross and semi-gross rents? Okay. And did you note the actual income generated by the building, and that would be on page 27? That's 209,000, and you're using...
Okay, we have total revenue on page 25. Office rent, we have 4,095. 4,095,000. We have parking revenue, storage revenue,
Right.
common area recovery. So all total revenue 8,065,000.
Yes, but I'm talking about the net revenue.
So,
Net income on page 27 is 209,000.
And if you apply vacancy loss, our effective gross income 474,000. It's very well supported by income statement provided by.
Well, that was my next question. You're saying your net operating income is 417,000, and they've declared 209,000. That's half, correct?
Not hard.
Have you inspected this property?
Yes, I've been in 2018 beginning.
Okay. And does your model, well, sorry, we'll back up a bit here. On page 8, the classic model points here, where would this one fit in? Like, what would you call this?
It's downtown B office.
Downtown B?
Mhm.
And, but it's not a B though, is this building?
For city of Winnipeg, same with Collier, CBRE, Cashman, Belfield.
No, but the,
We have downtown A in B only, that's why we
Right.
provide some information here. But from our valuation of producing property 2020 general assessment, we have range for most properties from 6.3 to 8%. So we did apply 7.8%, it's inside our range.
my question though was that you don't have a Class C in this chart, do you?
No one has.
Okay. And within your model, is there a method of adjusting the value parameters for the historical designation?
Yes.
There is. That's the first time I've heard anyone say you can adjust it for it.
We acknowledge it.
You acknowledge it,
Yes,
but do you
because
adjust a value? Is there anywhere you can adjust the value for the nature of the for it being a historical designation?
I don't know answer all my questions.
Okay.
Not even. But we following this list, we see.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buss?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
Mr. Neufeld raised the issue of the square footage. Do you have anything in your records about a small-
Usually for this type of property, 80% leasable area is acceptable. it is range, because we have a full gross floor area 72,000, and we apply 52%, 52,000, how many percent is it? We already have 72% leasable area for whole floor, gross floor area. It's in range, it's acceptable.
This is a 16% difference in leasable square feet between what you have in your records and what Collier's notes is the leasable square feet. That's a fairly significant amount, in my opinion, 16%. There's nothing in your records that would warrant a change, you're saying?
For now, we need to expect to update records.
Okay.
We're doing periodical, that's why sometimes this square footage fluctuates.
Okay. And so you said it was inspected in 2018? Or
Yes,
was it
but
just
it was for business move, it's not full inspection.
Okay, so it wasn't
I've been inside.
You've just been inside. Okay, sorry, I thought you said it was inspected.
No, not full inspections.
Based on this information, would the assessment department inspect it?
Yeah, I will
Okay,
put on records
thank you.
to inspect.
Thank you. So does the aggregate of the business assessment premises, does that total up to this
Yes, what
to
happens?
this leasable area?
Yes, when a business move, usually they provide lease area.
Mhm.
When we update this premise, specific premise, what is lease area. But sometimes businesses occupy two properties, two rooms. They remove walls, that's why this change happen.
And do you know sometimes are the leased areas, are they a gross up? Like there's
Yeah, good point. Sometimes it's bigger. They account for
common area?
Common area, yeah. That's why it's fluctuate. In our case, if it's 18%, it's okay. It's flexible.
Okay, and
If it will be going higher than 80%, so 20% we account between leasable and gross floor area. If it's go more lower, it's then when we start to clean building, because it's already changes huge.
and does it show in your records if this property's ever been to the municipal board under appeal?
One second, I should have some information. Yes, 2019 municipal court.
2019, and so it hasn't been heard yet?
Not yet, it's still pending. So before municipal board, it's our practice
Yeah,
going
no, I
inspect
just-
and clean records.
I just wondered if the leasable area had been an area of contention or whether there was a decision made, but it's still pending.
Mhm.
And the cap rate of 7.8%, that looks like that's a half a point premium from your 7.3 in suburban. Is that just a coincidence?
Because in our table on page 8, we have a range between 6.7, we have 6.75, but we have capitalization range for all properties between 6.3 and 8%. So we did apply 7.8% for these specific properties. It's inside our range, 20-80 percentiles. We just, you can, not full information presented on page 8, but we just try to be aligned with another agents, CBLE, Cushman, Colliers, how they presented A, B, suburban, downtown service, try to be in same line, show the same information only.
Okay, and Mr. Neufeld asked you, you didn't prepare this report?
No, but I full review.
Right, no, I
Yeah,
just,
it's my recommendation right now.
yeah, I just
I
wondered
don't change anything.
why the
Because I
boilerplate
have
portion.
ability after reviewing do my own recommendation, but
Yeah,
I'm
the
not-
boilerplate portion showing actual capitalization rates doesn't seem to be in here that I seem to see in other briefs, and I just
Yeah,
wondered.
that's why I refer to this information as public accessible information.
Okay,
And we have specific about capitalization rate,
yeah.
how we doing, how we apply.
No, but what I'm saying is that I've seen in the past, there's actual properties that they've established capitalization rates, and
But
that's
not
not.
for, in for this
Yeah.
time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Neufeld, certainly a place.
Thank you. The building's called the Power Building. It was actually, first user was the Manitoba Power Commission. When it was built, you could pay your electrical bills on the first floor, and the executive offices were on the top floor. That was the original, that's what it's called, and it has been historically designated. And I think in your package, I put a copy of the evaluation. I think, was there a second document? Yes, okay. Just double checking that. I represented the property before first historical, then standing policy, then EPC, and then presented at City Council. And this is my presentation. And the issues, to be clear, very briefly describing what the issues are. Now, the building was protected for a few things. One is the exterior finish, which is an example of 1928 styles of construction, and it is a nice-looking building. But my contention on that was, and I thought, city councilors might have a sense of humor. They do not. I said, you put a big, ugly walkway right in the middle of it. It's like stabbing it in the heart. You've already killed your aesthetics. But no laughs on that line. Anyway, the pictures in here show the other parts of it that are designated, and it's the window treatments that are around the windows, the reliefs. For some strange reason, this historical document, page 6. This is the rear of the building, and that's block. Those are masonry blocks. That was preserved. That was listed as to be preserved. And it puzzled me, I asked, what was the reason for it? Well, we don't have any examples like that from this era. Bumping ahead to page 10 is the next historically protected area, which are the stairwells. And this was the one that gives us the real problem, because that's a wooden banister. So it doesn't meet ISO requirements. So what that means is any company that has to follow ISO, which includes federal, provincial, city governments, can't rent a building that has flammable parts in its stairwells. So the historical protection just wiped out a major part of the potential users. Ironic that the city's doing it, and now the city wouldn't be allowed to lease it under their own standards. And page 12 shows more of the wooden banisters and the wooden doors. The one on page 12, the top one, is the janitor's closet. And underneath the stair, it has been painted and covered with a sealant, but it's terrazzo. Page 14, 15 shows some more pictures of it, as well as the entranceway. The only change that's been done is bottom of page 15. That's the main floor. It used to be a jewelry store, and they didn't use that for a main floor, for an entranceway. That was altered in about 2010. And then going back to page 7, page 7 is a hallway. There's one hall in the building that they managed to redo the common area. the concept of the rentable, the leasable area versus what the city has, just bear in mind that just because the city's got a policy that they say 80% is reasonable, that doesn't change the facts. This is the leasable area, and it was designed with a very, very wide hallway. Now, in 1975, I was the janitor in this building. So my friend and I, just for fun one day, we took his, actually this was 77, he had this 69 Olds Cutlass, and we measured it out, and we took it, the measurements upstairs, and we drove it around. You can actually turn a corner in a 69 Cutlass in this building. That's how wide the hallways are. It was designed for a different era, and so the rentable area then becomes two thin strips on either side of a very wide hallway. There's one set of offices on one of the wings where the hallway is actually wider, deeper than the space being rented. Now the 6th floor was set up for Manitoba Power Commission, and so that's a full floor, open floor. And that was has recently been demised as well, and that going back to the 2010 measurement, last changes were made. The other changes made were when the jeweler finally vacated, they abandoned all the space in that basement as being usable or rentable, and because the jeweler was using it and renting it at that time, they'd been renting it for quite some time, and it was no longer deemed rentable, so that was another change. And Tim Hortons got an outside entrance, which wasn't there. So these were the changes that occurred over the time. Page 17 is another protected thing. It's an original window. Now this one is in the stairwell. So the stairwell windows haven't been replaced. It's now protected. The unit windows were replaced around, I think in the 70s with the sealed units. And then we have the floor plates of the buildings on pages 18 and onwards. And there you can see the drawings, and the one that's been changed is on page 20. And that's the 3rd floor. They redesigned it to get some of the space back and to try and pick up. But the rest of the units, like I said, just very wide hallways, very large areas dedicated for mechanical and service and janitor's closets. Now, the new historical designation, which we fought to not get on it, will now prohibit any future changes, because that 3rd floor hallway conversion also changed the doorways to the stairwells before the heritage protection was put in place. So they have normal stairwell doors, but the other floors do not. So there will be no more changes, no more renovations. So we're stuck in time, so to speak, and it's an economic hardship on this building in terms of making it generate income. We're not opposed to historical designations, but this is a money-producing property, income-producing property, and freezing it with historical designations means that you're stalled in the marketplace. You can't react, and you can't make changes, and you can't get new tenants. That's the reality of it. The restrictions on it, you're pretty much looking for that mythical fairy tale tenant who can actually come in and live with all of these issues. That tenant doesn't exist. Now, that's the preamble and the background on it. The historical designation as to value. There's a error on this valuation workup because the mistake being made here is that this is pretty much a gross lease building, which means that all our arguments and worries about non-recoverables are really irrelevant. The bottom line number is, if I just did my math very quickly, that with a bit of declared vacancy of approximately 8%. The actual NOI is two, sorry, I just wrote it here, 209,027. That's the number that should have been used. And so not the NOI of 133, because the actual income accounts for every single cost. And going through those numbers, yes, there's a couple of numbers that the assessor now wants to call, we don't recognize those anymore, or whatever you want to call it, management fees, I call them non-recoverables. Well, how do they get the right to say we won't recognize them? Because there's still only $209,000 in income being generated out of this property, period, with 8% vacancy. So taking that number of 209,027 and I'm not changing the cap rate, 9.75, our value is actually 2,143,867. 2,143,867, rounded to 2,144,000. And the reasons for the cap relate to the regressive nature of the income, and this income is down. The building is. I have such a long history being involved with this building, and when the current owner took it over, early 2003, I think, it was pretty much a zero revenue building, and he took it over and he built the revenue, he made changes, attracted some newer styles of tenants, tried to get the spaces to be more usable, gone into the Skyway system, I forgot what we call it here, and now we've taken a step backwards with the historical designation. They've had to cancel all their plans to try to make the other 5 of the 6 floors be more useful in terms of offering greater rentable area and the amenity aesthetics that people want. And then again, closing down well over half the market who are not allowed to rent spaces that have flammable portions in them, the stairwells. We're stuck with that. So, and this, at the time we appealed this the last time, we had known most of this was happening. The repercussions hadn't been felt yet, but the NOI the last time around was 300,000, 30510. Now it's dropped to 209,027. Well, that's my presentation.
Thank you. Ms. Schabel, questions for the applicant?
If new tenants move in, then usually alteration, interior alteration is done, correct?
Sorry.
If when usually alteration, interior alteration happened?
Yeah.
When new tenants move in, correct? Before tenants.
Yeah, no, that's a general. In general, yeah. If you have tenant turnover, most landlords will see what they can do to the space. If they can put a couple of dollars into it to try and entice a better rent, yes, that's the goal.
Yeah. If, for example, Tim Hortons move in, it will be
Well,
alteration
no,
and all new ceiling,
they're-
work finish and
They're not a
electrical.
typical tenant. They're not a typical tenant.
Okay. What if on 6th floor was dental office move in? It was alteration, all walls, partial, fixture, finish, and mechanical, plumbing, electrical, correct?
Well, it'll be a mix of contribution by the landlord and by the tenant, depending on the lease.
Yeah, when tenants move, usually alteration, electrical, plumbing, walls, alteration, doing constantly on building,
Well-
so it's repair. Start, it's repair.
Yeah, the
So
general,
it's very well maintained building, let's say,
well, at a price, of course.
correct?
And that's what I'm trying to say.
If you want to attract tenants, you put inside money.
And the money, the expenditures are high. And what makes, the general rule of thumb, I think what you were asking was that when you have a tenant turnover, generally you try to get the interior of the space paid for by the tenant who's using it. Let them spend their own money on their own fit-up. However, with code compliance, it's always the landlord's responsibility. So code compliance on here have now added another layer, not just property and planning, but now we have historical to deal with. From a practical point of view, our leasing agents have to add 2 months to get approvals on it. So it's like I said, it's supposed to make money, and despite the historical designation, that's got to be the long-range goal, and it's not. I was looking through some of my older submissions and going back 10 years, and the income was $350,000. So we're on a decline.
You don't have any support evidence for your 6.7% rent, correct?
Yes, is the actual statement.
And what about your capitalization rate, 9.75%? It's not supported by your evidence, correct?
Their historical designated buildings don't get sold as investment properties. So the lack of data means that what you have to do when you're looking for a cap rate is you have to at least try to find similar situations or parallel situations. And the ones I would point out to would be on page 36, the two at the bottom of page 36. One was a building that had a very huge vacancy, but was going to be addressed, known to be addressed, and the other, it is a high cap rate due to its nature of its title. So it's a title restriction, which scares the market away and generates a 10% rent. Now, with historical designation, that is now a title restriction, a legal restriction. So I would disagree with your question and say that 180 King provides an indication of investor fear on where the rights of the property are restricted.
On page 35, as agent report, capitalization rate for downtown offices 6.25% to 7.25%, correct?
No,
it's 4 years
it's
capitalization rate.
Not even the same planet, not the same property. We don't track these, as I said earlier. The properties like this are generally not sold as investment properties. They're usually sold as a project building with basket cases. The turnaround, the value usually emanates from the land, the shell, and somebody's dream, and they sell cheap.
Thank you. No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Buss?
I'll defer for a minute if you don't mind.
Certainly, Ms. Nesbitt.
When was the actual historical designation made?
Well, it was... I'm just trying to remember if this June date was the date I appeared.
That's at the committee.
Yeah. Okay, no. December 5th, I appeared before historical. That's the first one.
Right.
And so then after that, it's the EPC standing and council, I think it took another year to go through the system. And then it was approved by council, so that my guess is roughly latter part of 2017. I could check it on my phone.
I just note
Ellen could check it, just, they have 428 Gordon on the clerk's Venus.
Is there anyone
You're not allowed.
I note that the province of Manitoba is currently a tenant in this, according to your page 20,
Right. Let me just
on the third floor,
Page 18.
and page 18 of that will.
Yes, and these drawings were done prior to the designation.
So So is the province of Manitoba still a tenant?
I'm not entirely sure. I haven't checked the roster lately. Yeah, we're showing, a lease starting in 2005 and expiring in 2020.
So they're still there currently?
Well, they're still paying the rent.
I'm still paying the rent. You don't know if they're physically there?
No, I don't. That's on the assessor's page.
18, or your page 18. Yeah, it says
Yeah,
it.
page 18, yeah.
Sorry,
No, that's okay.
you wouldn't have the 2018 rent roll in your files?
I do not with me.
Okay. So,
No, that's fine. It's fine. Just struck me as...
And I'm not sure which department it is, because whether it's a funded site or an actual government site, because the funded sites don't have to live with that, with those rulings. Like, if they fund some sort of social assistance program, and they're on the head lease, then that's, like the reason they put it in there is for government employees can't be housed in buildings with potentially flammable materials in the stairwell, but they can pay for outside agencies to rent space. So I don't know for sure what's on the third floor.
So those people can be at risk, but not government employees. Sounds
Well, yeah, I think it was part of the contracts, the union contracts as well, with the NGEU.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay, that's actually all the questions.
I'll come back to you, Mr. Musk.
Okay.
This leasable area, the total of the floor plates on your historical designation evaluation, if I look at page 5, they don't seem to total up to the same as...
Right. About part of these were projections.
Okay, so it's your contention that the 45 over 49 as reported by...
Yeah.
reported by the agent, I guess, the leasing agent.
Right.
That's...
Did you add up like every single one of these?
I did add them up.
Okay. Well, did they come to, was there a gross up added to them?
I don't know.
No. I was just wondering what your number was.
44, 134 is what I think.
So 44, 134, so there might be a gross up. I can tell you that page 22, fifth floor, that's the owner's own space, Neptune Properties, and on the page 21, the fourth floor, Martin Eagleton is their property manager. It's actually on site, and I've spoken with them on the measurement side, and they said they've done a BOMA on it with a 5049. This may be a contractor's sketch. The reason this sketch was made, on page 20, this was the plan to do this space, like page 20. And that's what it's produced. And there's the provincial tenant. So they're actually, their entry doors to the stairwell are no longer wood, but the stairwells are.
The hammerings.
Yes. And the facing and, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Buss.
On the bottom of page 4, for the expense statements of expense, the net income in that one column is 209,000 and something. That's where the number you're using.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what did I say, 209?
It's hard to read, 086 or something it is?
I think I gave you a slightly different, I said 209,027. Yes, you're right, I'm sorry, that should be 209,086.
Okay, so if you follow up that column, there's three, about midway up, there's three expenses here. One is parking rent, $22,777. The other is leasing commissions. The other is tenant improvements. It says parking rent, but they've got it as an expense.
Yes, they rent space in the Bay Parkade for their tenants, and then if you look on page,
Okay, well, that's good.
they charge for the rent on page 3.
Okay, and the next one, leasing commissions?
Well, it's an ongoing thing. This is the nature of our dispute with the city on non-recoverable costs. They are part of the operating system. You can't ignore it. Investors aren't going to ignore it. You've got a roster of 30-odd tenants with turnovers like this. It's an ongoing cost. No one's
So
gonna-
you've left those in, and the TIs, the tenant improvements, you
Yeah,
left in as well?
And that's going to be for code-related issues as they go through space by space. Or just changing the rug when you have a tenant turnover. You know, in an apartment block, it's kind of strange that the city assessor never blinks on an apartment block. You tell them, well, we got to turn over a suite, so we have to put in new rugs, maybe a new fridge, new stove. No big deal. That's part of the expenses. And now in the commercial world, oh, no, we don't allow that. That's covered by 2%. Well, it's not.
Thank you, that's all my questions.
I'd just like to follow up on that a little bit if I could. Then you've got, on page 4, you've got Martin Eagleton Limited. And
Yes.
it's got owners.
That's the property manager.
Okay, so we've got the parking rent, owner's property tax, and those are listed as expenses. Would the rent revenue on page 3?
Balance that off?
I don't know, is there,
Well, there's parking revenue listed on page 3 at $19,000 of income. And let's see, the expenses on the parking are 5,000.
5,040?
Yeah. Was there another line? I thought the assessor pointed at another line. Can't recall. Or was that the only line?
I don't know.
I'm just.
Parking rent, 22,777.
Where's that line?
And that's above mid here. Just above leasing commissions.
Oh, got it. Parking rent, 22,777, plus another 5,000, so they're spending 27, and they're recovering 19,960 in income. So what that would be is the difference between full recovery from a tenant or included in the lease. Government, for example, provincial government. Again, that's another thing, if it is a provincial agency, require the rent, parking is in their lease. I'm not entirely sure what this owner's parking rent on the classification on it, on where that belongs. And I did ask this question 4 years ago when I did it. It's the rent they pay for their office staff. That's what it is. So because the owner actually works in the building, and it's Neptune Properties. So this is their head office for, they own about 15 buildings across Manitoba and Winnipeg, and then a couple in Saskatchewan, a couple in Alberta, and BC. Not BC. Yeah, Saskatchewan and Alberta. So you know, they're charging it to the building. So questionable, is that a business an expense off? I mean, for sake of argument, to play safe, I guess there's nothing wrong with subtracting or adding that number back into the statement. I don't think that's improper. So that would just bump it up a bit. That brings my NOI up to 214,126.
Thank you.
which is, yeah, then that just brings the value to 2,196,164, which is rounded to 2,196,000. Again, lower than last year, but so is the income by $100,000.
Thank you. Desire for summation? No?
I think we covered it.
Okay, thank you. I think at this point we'll just take a short break. One more to do, but a 10-minute break, please. Okay, I'll call the hearing back to order. The last property you have to deal with this morning is 1700 Ellis. So when we're ready, Mrs. Assessor, go ahead from there, please.
19-4691. Roll number is 0702281000. Owner is Red Holdings X64 Corporation. We are valuing the property assistance of January 1st, 2020, based on economic conditions as April 1st, 2018. This appeal is with respect to the amount of the assessed value only, based on the evidence in this report. It is assessor opinion that the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018, $5,293,000, and that the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed. The subject property is located at southeast corner of Century and Ellis Avenue. On page 9, we have photo of subject property. There is, the subject site has a rectangular shape of 49,054 square feet. On property we have two improvements. Improvements with RD 1700 Ellis Street was built in 1968 with 30,376 square feet. And another property has address 585 Century. And Century Avenue was built in 1959 for 9,700 square feet. On page 3, 2, 4, we have 55 comparables for comparables to represent subject properties. These were 8 comparables and leases started 2007 to 2019, and the median lease is $13.75. For the subject property, we applied $10.93 overall on page 5. Subject property market income for 38,808 square foot. It's a square footage for both buildings. We did apply $10.93 average. Our potential income $424,000. For this type of property, we applied 5.5% vacancy loss. And also we allowed for 2% expense allowance that include advertising, promotion, professional fee, structural repairs, and also shortfall allowance per square foot to account for non-recoverable expenses during time of vacancy, $7. Our capitalization rate for this property is 7.2%. That on page 7, support by Suburban, the office, city of Winnipeg, 80% showed 6.2, 7.3% range. On page 12, the owner own three office, two office building, 170 Ellis Street, 582 Century, and plus another, it's belong to another property, it's a warehouse, it's 16880 Ellis Avenue. It's posted. On page 16, and this list showed that that net rent was asking for this office buildings and $12.50 for on main floor and $13.50 on second floor. You can see that one on main floor photos. On page 19, second floor map. So we did apply average $10.93. It's reasonable. Based on the evidence in this report, his assessor opinions that the market value of subject property as April 1st, 2019, $5,293,000 and should be confirmed.
Thank you. Mr. Newfeld, questions?
First, are we dealing with the one dated December 24th, 2019?
There's only one before.
There's only one, okay. All right. And Mr. Pohl prepared this report?
Yes, and I did review it.
Okay.
It's my opinion.
And have you changed anything from the original report?
No,
Oh,
no
okay.
changes. It should be confident.
Page 5, evaluation was done by the model.
Correct?
And on page 12, 13, 14, 15, all the way up to page 20. Are these current documents?
Yes, it's before reference date, April 1st, 2019.
The same documents were presented 2 years ago, so
Because on page 16, we can see available October 1st, 2017, so it's before reference date.
and so how much is being available for release on these pages? I've got page 16, availability, approximately 15,000 square feet approximately.
Correct?
And you've applied, that would be roughly 30, well over 30%, but 40% of the space, wouldn't it?
Possibly.
Yeah, and your model put in a vacancy of 5.5%.
Correct. Because during this time, 2017 and 2018, the police was posted, it was done renovation for this building.
The information on page 21, 22, 23, and where did this come from?
It's reported by the owner.
By the
It's
owner.
a common sense matter.
Okay, so this is the owner's return, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, on their area, they have 39,243 square feet, and you're at 38,808.
Yes, correct?
Okay, so you haven't made any changes for their space?
Not yet.
Okay. And they're also saying 29% vacancy, but you did not take that into account?
No, but 2015 showed 0%, 2014 showed 0% vacancy, 2013 was 5% vacancy.
Okay.
So our 5.5% vacancy, if you spread for 10 years, it's account for vacancy in 2017, when it was under renovation before this.
Well, you just quoted 4 years, not 10 years, and the average on
I just have information.
average on your 4 years would actually be about 9% by my math.
Because usually before a new lease expired and renovation happened.
Has there been any alterations to the owner's statement?
No.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to not finish my questions, but I have something to submit to the board.
It's new information.
Something that's a rebuttal.
Oh, yes.
Show that to the assessor first, please.
Last page.
By what I join report here. It's not accessible. I don't know what is it.
So the last page of that report, the first page is the cover page from the assessor's brief. The second page is the assessor's page 21.
Right.
And the last page is the actual submission by the owner, which we got from the city's My Property site, as well as from the owner. You'll see that line 215 was deleted. And the final net operating income as a result increased by the same amount.
215,
It's an entry for vacancy expenses,
right, so it's
97,457. That's what the owner submitted.
Okay, what owner submitted right now and my briefs, it's, I don't know, I not accepted this, because I verified this.
right, but the applicant's saying that this is taken right from the website, did you say?
This is what was submitted to the city. You see that
It's confusing. It's not correct.
all of the other numbers match. Line 215 has been deleted in the presentation today.
I would like to mention that this report owner submit online
Right.
for 2017. So and plus owner have by 2019 when we did reassessment, this was submitted online. But owner has abilities several years later to come back and change something. It's what maybe happened. I don't know.
No, they don't have
That's,
that ability to change. The last page, we logged into the site and downloaded what had been submitted to the city.
When was that done, Mr. Newfall?
It was done yesterday.
So this is what was downloaded yesterday.
Yes, that's correct.
If I download yesterday, should be died when you download.
So what this is an alteration of evidence. And this is the 6th time that and we're not looking for these, we just begun to start noticing them. This is the 6th time that evidence that an owner has submitted has been altered and then presented to this board. And I'm not a lawyer, but there's a word for it that I wouldn't hesitate to use. But it's a very serious offense. I'm not saying that this particular assessor didn't. She already stated that she did not prepare this brief. So I understand that she didn't prepare it. But I think it's something the board has to take very seriously when a party who's in a trust position presents different evidence to you than the owner is.
So, are you saying that we should be ignoring the income and expense information that's provided by the assessor then?
I'm saying I believe that the proper procedure is to dismiss all of the assessor's evidence, because it's presented as a brief, not as a segment of a brief that's easily detachable and not relevant. You know, when somebody presents a brief stapled together, now you know that we're not stopping here, obviously.
It's brief staple together, presented from another person.
That we do intend that this will go other places. But we only caught this last night at 5 o'clock.
Did you want to continue with your questioning then?
Well, I suppose then the question is, were you aware that this evidence had been altered?
I will look into it. I need to go in my system and see what's there.
Okay, so I have no other questions, and then at this point I just ask the board to remove all of the assessor's evidence as it's tainted.
I prepare my review this evidence 2 days ago.
No, that's fine. It's a request that Mr. Neufeld is making. The board will take that under consideration.
Okay.
So did you have questions, Mr. Buss?
The question of the assessor now.
Yes, we are.
I was going to ask about the date on page 16, but I see it's been pointed out that that's 2017 information. And no, I have no questions.
Ms. Memphis?
I have no questions.
I don't have any questions. Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, let's hear from you, please.
Thank you. The subject property is been converted a few times. I think its first construction was for NTS, and there's been some changes on it, and so currently it's in use as an office, and we're using the actual income. Now, after pointing out all those discrepancies in the size, I'm not using the assessor's size either. Now, the size I'm using, 39,761, actually comes from an old management report from the time that Huntington Reed controlled this site. And the reason I deemed it to be more reliable is because we now have the property manager who worked on Huntington Reed working for us, so I was able to review some of this data. Regardless, in this particular case, because we are relying on the actual income, the size of the area isn't important. For the assessor, it is important, but when you're relying on actual income, the differences in dimensions only serves to change the shortfall rate. Now, the vacancy on it is in the reference year 29%. So the bottom box. Sorry, I'm just at a loss on this 29%, and we have it penciled in at 36. Regardless, we're not. We somewhat agree with the assessor that there are times when there'll be periodic vacancies, and she is correct, in 2015 there was no vacancy. In 2013 there was vacancy. So we do have a building that is prone to vacancy more than other buildings, and that's because of the nature of the building, the conversions, and the location. Basically, an inferior office on Ellis at King Edward is not a good property. And so as a result, we've stabilized out at 16.2%, and what we did is looked at suburban office rates as reported by Johnson, and the Johnson report, which we're now relying on for all of our valuations, is this report. It's published twice a year, and has every building in the city, every commercial building in the city, investment building listed, and breaks down the vacancies, asking rates, pertinent information about buildings. So the building would generally be, in terms of classification of this building, that's why I'm not sure if I'm giving the update. Yes, on page 11, this is the Johnson classification, and the subject property doesn't meet the buildings. I'm just looking at it, does not show up as any sort of suburban designation. You can see that they have suburban A, 3 buildings, B, 7 buildings, and C, about 10 buildings, and it is not on this classification. So that puts it into miscellaneous, office miscellaneous. So we looked at all of those rates. This is when you have a property class and type that doesn't fit into a neat little cubby hole for description, you look at all the potential uses, and you have to make a judgment call. So where we got that from was right here with the suburban office listed at 6.6 and suburban miscellaneous at 5.2%. And then the actual, which was actually 29%, not 36. So we ended up at 16%, and that's a good indication of where this building performs in the market. 1 year, really bad. Next year it's full. Next year it's bad again. So you're going to see an up and down with this because of the styles and tendencies that it employs. It's certainly not a high-class building. It's dealing with the miscellaneous user, local user, higher turnover. The income we're using is the actual income after being stabilized. And sorry, I just finished reading this, and I was so on page 3. We have the actual statement that was submitted, and so in this one they're getting approximately a little over $400,000 in income, and $407,000. That's what we're using now. That income, if the statement is read properly, is potential income. Every property owner uses a different style of statements, and some, like when we were looking at 428 Portage, they didn't even bother with the vacancy because it's a gross building. They don't track it, but most net buildings track the vacancy, and what they'll do is they'll plug in the number for as if fully occupied, and then later on subtract the vacancy expense. And that's what the actual statement did. So on page 3, the actual income as full is the 358 plus the 30,800 plus the 6,700, 407,000, and then there were recoveries. And in the expense side, on the expense side, then they have the line 215 that was removed, 97,457. That's the vacant space expense. So what that is then that's the debit to the credit for the empty space. that's how their statements are work out. And so the actual NOI on the site as 30% vacant in that particular year was $198,000, but because we adjusted it to 16%, the actual NOI comes to $251,000. And that's how we came up with the valuation. These are actual incomes at a vacancy rate. And the non-recoverable calculation was, in this particular instance, is not a percentage, but it was taken from the costs that were typically non-recoverable on this for this site, and that is the line immediately above line 215, which is the landlord expense, $14,507. Structural reserve, again, is for allocation for roof replacement. The shortfall is calculated by the actual costs to occupy, 1021 a square foot, that's the actual CAM applied. So that leads us to our NOI of not 251, which again, just to repeat, is higher than the actual NOI, because we're calling that the spike in the vacancy is periodic, but a high vacancy is called for. Now, as to the cap rate, the issue, if you're applying a high vacancy rate, you don't have to apply a cap rate to compensate for it. So I think the cap rate should be coming down a fair bit. But on page 39, this property sold as part of a portfolio in October 2015. The actual cap rate was 8.6%. Now there's three numbers listed there. When I calculated these through, first I put in the city parameters on it, which is, at the time we had the appeals file and we had all the model generated incomes that the assessor used, which happened to be kind of on the high side, which is why it capped using city parameters at 9.95%. The 8.92% calculation was including 2019 Sargent, which was a one-off property, so we deleted that from the calculation, and the 8.6 is the actual. So at the time it was sold, it had a low vacancy, and now it doesn't. So as I said, I think we're accounting for that vacancy risk. So in this particular instance, I think one could probably use a balanced rate. The concept of putting a valuation together isn't to posture yourself to have the worst cap, the worst rents, and everything the worst. You got to have balance in life, and if you accounted for something on the income side, then you shouldn't double account for it in the cap side. So I'm just changing that cap rate to 8%, because we're already dealing with it. And that number is $3,139,187, 3,139,187, rounded to $3,139,000. The previous year's assessment is under appeal at the municipal board, and I think this is our third appeal of this. The one prior to that was at $4.5 million. So the number is lower because the vacancy is higher. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Ms. Assessor, questions?
Do you have information about tenants in these buildings today, current time? Do you have information about tenants?
Tenants?
Yeah.
Not other than what's been provided already in the evidence.
Okay. Are you alert that
What page?
585 Century Street occupied by Kino Sao City Minnesota agents and by the effective by January 2018. So 585 Century full occupied, and by middle 2018, all listing posted in my report on page 16, occupied also.
Well, sure.
So
but-
no vacancy, zero vacancy right now.
But,
We still apply 5.5%
okay,
vacancy,
second.
correct?
Well, assuming that's a question, that's not the point. The point is in the reference here, there was a high vacancy. In previous years, there were high vacancies. So what I said was, this building has a history of being spiky, going up and down and up and down, because they're just not, it's not tenants that are staying for a long time. It's not a great building. It's office space on Ellis, and that's what you would expect for it. It's not a class building, it's not a good building. The roster of tenants that we have, there's occupational rehab, Insight Canada, and 2 First Nations users. So, when I say they're not good tenants, I don't mean they themselves. What I mean is their covenants. How long do they stay? It's not a stable rental property.
That's why if tenancy a few years in a row is zero, we still give 5.5% vacancy. It shows that in 10 years, it will be change of lease. New tenants, it's normal, that's why we constantly give this
Yes.
vacancy account for future change, because spike happened, it's market.
Agree.
Correct, yeah?
Agree, but it's the strength of the spike. We rarely see a 30% vacancy on a building, and when you're applying 5.5%, usually one year it's full, the next year it's 10%. You know, and that's the concept on that. This one is more aggressive, that's all. And it speaks to the quality.
Page 8 through page 11, agent information, evidence. It's post-reference June 2018 Johnson's report, correct?
No, that's incorrect.
No questions.
The data was collected prior to April 1st, 2018.
Thank you. Mr. Buss.
When is the data from in the Johnson report? Is it 2017 data that he's giving?
Well, when I spoke to Wayne Johnson about this, he publishes a report in June 2018. It's delivered then. So May is printing and binding. April is slapping it together, and so what this is the data he's collected in the previous 6-month cycle, 6 months prior, because he also puts out a December report, which gets put out in October.
So it's somewhere in, when you put out a report, usually you would say this report covers the time period from...
He didn't know he was going to get cross-examined on it.
Well, yeah, you can't put out a book full of numbers and not tell people where the numbers come from.
It's a document for the professionals, and we're aware of it. Like when, for example, Colliers gets this report, and we can look at a building, one of the buildings that we manage. Here's 428 Portage is listed here, and we know exactly where the numbers came from because we're in the business, and so we're not stymied by it. Now, the only time would be, you know, if you want to split hairs when you get to a judicial hearing on the quality of post-reference. The point is...
Okay, I think. Well, the point, I asked what the dates were, and you don't know, so that's...
No, I know.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson says they are all prior to April of 2018. And just to be... I'm going to keep going on this, because just think about the reasonableness. Do you think all of these just popped up between April 1st and June 1st?
Oh, I'm not saying they did.
Well,
I'm just making... I would reiterate what I said before. If somebody puts out a book full of numbers, there's somewhere it's got to say what the dates for those numbers start and finish. But I would believe that they all did not happen between June.
No,
1st
and I've worked with Wayne for a long time, and his predecessor is Ken Croach. And Ken, I worked with at Stevenson, so, I mean, I actually saw Ken assembling the book and saw him working on it. So I'm not, it's more than just asking the question, it's seeing him work on it.
I would think it would be a yearly book, and that would be the 2017 book.
It would be he'd go back about a year.
Do you know what the vacancy was at April 1st, 2018 on this building?
I believe it was the 29%. And just let me just double check. Their submission on this was dated December 31st, 2017, 29%. I know a way of figuring it out. The last hearing was, remember I asked the assessor a question of that I've seen this information before. It was actually produced for hearing January 31st, 2018. So it was vacant then, January 31st. We know it at least January 31st, 2018.
It was 29%.
Yes.
Okay, that's good, thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I have no questions.
Didn't want to.
No? Want me to?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to note something also on that I&E statement that you have,
I saw it. I know what you're going to say.
the square footage.
Yes, I saw that as well. I don't know what to say. This is what was submitted. And then there was a change on it.
So the actual,
Well, this is there's three buildings here, three titles here. And I think that when the owner put it in,
that's what I'm wondering.
when the owner put in the square footage, I'm not entirely sure what they were doing. It's
Yeah.
wrong. It's wrong.
Yeah.
But and it was changed. I think that's the key point. Someone changed it. If you change stuff that's wrong or you change stuff that's right, it's still an alteration, which is quite improper.
Both of these have the same number, I believe.
But not on the city's information. The square footage is 39,000 compared to 50.
Yeah.
Well, and also, if you look, the assessor's using 38,808, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's hard to say who changed this number to 39,243.
The only thing we're certain of is that this is what the owner submitted, because this is consistent. We pulled this off when we prepared this statement back in December, and then last night we pulled it again, because we have their password.
When you
for
say,
my
sorry,
properties.
just to clarify, when you say you pulled it, this was downloaded from the website.
Yeah, there's a private website, it's called My Properties, and if you have the password, you go into it, and you can get a copy of the statements that are on it. And the one we pulled off is the
The
one,
one that was attached to the 3-pager.
the last page, the same one that I have in my report. It was checked at 2 different times, so that's where it was downloaded to. So in between the time it was downloaded onto the site and it reached our table here today, there were 2 changes made to it. And I really don't want to speculate. I've heard many comments on how it could have happened. But I think the point is that it happened, and that's bad.
Do you ask the owner where he got 50,573 from?
No, we were content because we had old management reports. So I tell you the truth, we didn't even look at that number. But they have 1680 Ellis, 1700 Ellis, 530 Century, and 585 Century, and in their management reports, they're all listed separately, even though some of the roles are joint. So they probably just added it wrong from their management reports. My speculation,
But the 39,761 that you're using is based on an old management?
Yeah,
report?
it's, I have the Huntington and Family management reports for the investors done for the, in 2014. And so it's a couple of volumes, and it breaks them all down so you can actually correlate the buildings' sizes and tenancies. So that's how I've reconciled.
So we're done?
Yeah, just trying to sort it out.
Okay. Finally, I guess, vacancy, do you consider that to be an economic factor or a physical factor?
It's a mix of both. It's just an inferior building in an inferior location, and it's prone to massive shifts in vacancy because it's people aren't sticking around. It's sort of like in the retail world, compare it to the mall across the street from St. Vital Center or the mall way down at the end of the highway. You know, that it's just a difference. They attract tenants with worse covenants, and they turn over more.
Thank you. Desire for summation?
No, I just want you to thank me for not handing out my big pile of rebuttal stuff. You've all seen it before, so really.
It's ingrained in our memories. Okay, thank you. That will conclude our hearing. Thank you both for your presentations today.